Statement. Mr. Olawuyi, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I'm honored to present the report of the Working Group on Business and Human Rights to the 78th session of the General Assembly on extractive sector, just transition, and human rights. In the report, the Working Group explores factors leading to human rights abuses in the context of energy transition programs, including how the design and implementation of such programs remain largely characterized by power imbalances, fragmented and inconsistent regulatory frameworks. The report considers how to address persistent challenges by offering states, businesses, and other stakeholders in the extractive sector action-oriented recommendations on how to best design and implement just, inclusive, and human rights-based energy transition programs in line with the United Nations guiding principles on business and human rights. Since the adoption of the Paris Agreement in 2015, a growing number of stakeholders worldwide have announced or are currently developing commitments and plans to implement energy transition programs. Yet, concerns have emerged on how the design and implementation of these programs, especially the sourcing of transition minerals, may further exacerbate business-related human rights abuses. For example, energy transition programs in some states have been linked or have contributed to serious human rights abuses, such as land grabs, forced displacements, child labor, modern slavery, discrimination, environmental pollution, and others. The energy transition cannot replicate or create new forms of human rights and environmental abuses, including poverty, corruption, and conflict risk. The energy transition drive must be consistent with states' human rights obligations and commitments, including the realization of the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, SDG 13 on climate change mitigation and adaptation, and with the Paris Agreement. Excellencies, states must seize the ongoing energy transition as an opportunity to promote just transition laws and policies and hold business, including investors, accountable for human rights abuses across the entire value chain. By taking action based on the recommendations in this report, states, businesses, and other relevant stakeholders can ensure that the pursuit of the Sustainable Development Goals and implementation of the Paris Agreement includes guarantees of human rights protection. Policy coherence is key to advance a just transition, as decisive and coherent action by states across key government bodies is needed to include human rights and sustainable development considerations across energy transition initiatives. This includes the development and implementation of legislation protecting the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Further, many businesses recognize that the private sector benefits from policy and regulatory clarity, and in fact demand consistency and predictability on how to design, implement, and communicate energy transition programs. To advance policy coherence, energy, environmental, and investment policies must be collaboratively developed and ensure the protection of human rights. A just transition will also require strong coordination at the international, regional, national, and local levels. Further, states will have to fulfill their extraterritorial obligations, as trying to meet international climate commitments domestically cannot justify overlooking human rights abuses in the states where extractive activities are taking place. The terms of extractive sector agreements have a bearing on the ability of states to regulate the conduct of businesses for just transition. So states should maintain sufficient domestic policy space while negotiating new extractive contracts, concessions, or bilateral agreements, or reforming existing agreements in order to meet their human rights obligations under international law. Businesses, especially those in the extractive sector, must play an indispensable role in promoting respect for human rights by integrating human rights in the design and implementation of energy transition plans and programs. Civil society and impacted communities, including indigenous peoples and human rights defenders, play a critical role in enabling businesses and investors to identify, prevent, and address human rights risks. The growing number of regulatory developments unfolding at national, regional, and international levels reinforce the increasing expectation on businesses to prevent, mitigate, and address adverse impacts on human rights of their energy transition efforts, which is a positive development. However, the working group stresses that current regulatory and policy frameworks do not sufficiently and coherently ensure human rights protection, including through meaningful participation of affected communities, access to information, including data transparency, and access to effective remedies when harm occurs. To advance transition towards a just energy transition programs should be designed with international human rights standards and the UNGPs in mind, including standards on decent work, capacity building, social inclusion, public participation, and environmental protections. Thank you very much.
I thank the chair of the working group on the issue of human rights in transnational cooperation and other business enterprises. I will now open the floor for any question and comment to Mr. Olawuyi. As per past practice, I will ask delegation to limit their comment to 3 minutes.